Anxiety and depression, right? It feels like they're everywhere these days.
Yeah.
Most of us have either dealt with it firsthand or know someone who has.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's kind of wild how common these experiences are,
Mm.
but how much confusion still surrounds them.
Yeah.
So today we're doing a deep dive into all things anxiety and depression. We've got a podcast transcript here, some sponsor info, all sorts of stuff.
Sounds like a lot to unpack.
It is, but hopefully we can shed some light on these complex conditions and maybe even find some, I don't know, glimmers of hope along the way.
Yeah, that's key, right? Because one of the biggest things this source emphasizes is that both anxiety and depression are medical conditions,
Yeah.
not like personal failings or anything.
That's so important to remember. It's like
Yeah.
you wouldn't blame someone for having a heart condition, right?
Right.
But mental health. Oh, there we go. Blaming ourselves, blaming others. And speaking of the body, something that really stuck with me reading through all this is how anxiety and depression aren't just like in our heads. There's a whole biological side to this, especially when you look at brain chemistry.
Absolutely. This source goes into the role of neurotransmitters like serotonin, dopamine, norepinephrine.
Oh, yeah, those.
Basically, think of them as messengers in your brain, helping different parts communicate. And they impact everything: mood, motivation, sleep, even physical functions.
And so it's more than just those simple explanations you hear sometimes, like serotonin's just the happy chemical.
Way more nuanced. Like, there are actually different types of serotonin receptors all over your brain and body, each one with its own job. Some are for mood, some for sleep, some even affect appetite.
Whoa. Okay, so it's complicated.
Yeah, when we say serotonin imbalance, it's not just about feeling happy or sad. It can show up in all sorts of ways.
Wow, that's pretty fascinating. And what about dopamine and norepinephrine? They're in the mix too, right?
Totally. Dopamine's tied to our reward system, motivation. That feeling you get when you achieve something or have a good experience, that's dopamine doing its thing. Norepinephrine, on the other hand, that's more our stress response, how we react to threats. So if these are out of whack, it can really mess with your thoughts, emotions, even your physical health.
Okay, I'm starting to see how all these pieces kind of connect.
Yeah.
But there was also this mention of vitamins in the source, which I found really surprising.
Yeah, that was interesting, wasn't it? It specifically talked about vitamin B12 and vitamin D deficiencies and how they're linked to a higher risk of mood disorders. Again, it goes back to the idea that our physical health and mental health are super interconnected.
So even something as simple as not getting enough of a certain vitamin could contribute to anxiety or like low mood.
It's definitely a factor to consider, especially with our lifestyles these days, right? Lots of people's diets aren't great, not enough time outdoors for that natural vitamin D from sunlight.
It makes you wonder how many people are struggling with mood stuff that could be helped by just some simple changes.
It's a piece of the puzzle for sure. And on that note of lifestyle, the source also talked about chronic stress and how it can actually change your brain chemistry over time.
Oh yeah, that constant feeling of being on edge.
Yeah.
How does that actually do that to your brain?
Well, when you're stressed out all the time, your body's in fight or flight mode 24/7. You're pumping out stress hormones like cortisol, and that can mess with how those neurotransmitters, we were talking about how they're made and how they work. Over time, boom, imbalances that lead to anxiety and depression.
So it's like a vicious cycle. Stress messes up your brain. You're more likely to get anxious or depressed, which makes you more stressed.
Exactly. And then to add another layer to this whole thing, we've got to talk about genetics.
Uh-oh.
While lifestyle and environment play a big role, there's a genetic component too. Just like some people are prone to, say, heart disease, some folks are just genetically more susceptible to anxiety and depression.
So it's not about blame your genes, but understanding that they can kind of set the stage in a way.
Exactly. Mental health, just like physical health, is a mix of nature and nurture, genes, environment, and the choices we make.
Okay, so we've got this whole web of factors. Brain chemicals, vitamins, stress, genetics. It's complex, man.
It really is.
But what about, like, the social side of things? The source mentions loneliness as a huge EE factor, which in our super connected world, I find kind of mind-blowing.
It is a paradox, isn't it? We're bombarded with online connections, yet so many feel deeply lonely. This source even says loneliness can be as bad for you as smoking or obesity.
It's like we're confusing the quantity of connections with the quality, right?
Mm.
Trading real relationships for a bunch of surface-level interactions.
It's a good point, and it raises this big question about how technology is shaping our social lives. Are we using it to actually connect or just making ourselves feel more isolated?
Man, I know I've been there scrolling through social media, feeling kind of connected in this fake way, but ending up even more lonely.
That's a common experience. Like we're getting a hit of connection, but it's not the good stuff, the stuff that really nourishes us.
So, to sum it up, we've got biological stuff, psychological stuff, social stuff, all potentially feeding into anxiety and depression. It really highlights how we need I don't know, a holistic approach to this, right?
Absolutely.
But who's most at risk here? Are there certain groups this tends to target?
Well, anyone can experience anxiety or depression, but some groups might be more vulnerable. Like this source points to young adults at 18 to 29 age range.
Yeah.
They're under so much pressure.
Oh, yeah. Figuring out school, careers, relationships, what you even want to do with your life.
Right. It's a recipe for stress.
And then there's teenagers, right? Hormones going crazy, plus all the usual social anxieties at that age.
It's a huge period of change physically and emotionally. It makes them more susceptible to mood swings and, well, just feeling more vulnerable overall.
And then we can't forget about women. Statistically, they're more likely to experience anxiety and depression throughout their lives. Is that mainly hormonal, or are there other things at play?
Hormones are definitely part of it, especially with periods, pregnancy, menopause, all that. But we also have to acknowledge the societal pressures, the gender roles that women face.
Right, like so many women are juggling a million things: work, family, societal expectations. That's a lot to carry.
It is. And then on the other end of the age spectrum, you've got older adults who might be dealing with more isolation, health problems, losing loved ones.
Yeah, that's a tough phase of life, too.
If those transitions aren't handled well, it can lead to loneliness and despair.
But here's the thing, right? Within each of these groups, everyone's experience is different. It's not one size fits all. We can't just assume we know what someone's going through based on their age or gender or whatever.
Totally agree. It's about recognizing individual needs and offering support that's actually helpful for that specific person.
Exactly. So we've talked about the why behind anxiety and depression, who it affects. But now I think we need to get into, like, the feeling of it, Cause this source used this really powerful image of an internal storm.
Powerful image.
What does that actually mean, though? Like, what does it feel like to be in that storm?
So imagine constant worry or fear, even when there's no real danger. Your thoughts are racing, jumping from one worst-case scenario to the next. You feel tense, your heart might be pounding, maybe you're even having trouble breathing. That's the kind of experience the source is talking about.
Yeah, that internal storm, I get it. It's
Yeah.
like you're trapped in this cycle of fear and worry you can't escape. And with depression, is it a different kind of feeling?
It's more like this heavy blanket of sadness, emptiness, hopelessness. The world might seem dull, joyless. You might struggle to even get out of bed, lose interest in things you used to love. And there's this exhaustion that goes way beyond just being physically tired.
Man, that sounds incredibly isolating. And debilitating, really.
It can be.
And, I think it's important to acknowledge that these conditions can sometimes lead to thoughts of suicide.
Absolutely. If you're experiencing that or someone you know is, please reach out for help immediately. Suicide prevention hotlines, therapists, anyone who can offer support.
Don't wait. There are people who want to help, who care. And speaking of help, maybe we can shift gears a bit and talk about the resources that are out there for folks struggling with anxiety and depression. The source mentioned a few different options, from friends and family to medical professionals.
Yeah, that's crucial. You don't have to go through this alone. Sometimes just leaning on your friends and family can make a huge difference. They might not have all the answers, but just having someone to listen without judgment can be so comforting.
Yeah, it's about feeling seen, heard, knowing someone cares about what you're going through.
Exactly. And then there's professional help, which can give you a more structured approach to dealing with these challenges. Therapists, counselors, they can act as guides, give you tools and strategies to manage your symptoms.
The source specifically mentioned something called cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT. Can you explain what that is, like in simple terms? How does it actually help?
So CBT is basically about retraining your brain to think and react differently to situations. It's based on this idea that our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors are all connected. So if you can identify and challenge those negative thought patterns, you can start to change how you feel and act.
So, like, you become aware of those automatic negative thoughts that pop up, and then you choose to look at things from a more helpful, realistic perspective.
Exactly. Let's say someone with social anxiety is about to walk into a crowded room. That thought might pop up, everyone's judging me. CBT helps you question that. What's the evidence for that? Is it really true that everyone's judging you? What are some other explanations for how people are acting?
So instead of getting sucked into that negative spiral, you're learning to reframe the situation and see things differently.
Right. It's about interrupting those automatic thoughts and replacing them with ones that are more helpful and more accurate.
Okay, that makes sense. And alongside therapy, I know psychiatrists can also assess whether medication might be helpful.
Yeah, sometimes medication can be a really valuable tool to help balance brain chemistry and ease symptoms. But it's not a quick fix. It's part of a bigger plan that also includes therapy and lifestyle changes.
Speaking of lifestyle changes, the source really emphasized things like exercise, diet, sleep, all that good stuff. I'm curious about the exercise piece, though. How does moving your body actually help your mental state?
Well, exercise is amazing for both your physical and mental health. When you work out, your body releases endorphins, which are like natural mood
It's like
boosters.
that runner's high people talk about, right?
Yeah,
Those feel-good chemicals flooding your brain.
exactly. And it doesn't have to be crazy intense exercise either. Even moderate stuff like walking or gardening can make a difference.
Okay, good to know. What about diet?
A balanced diet with lots of fruits, veggies, omega-3 fatty acids, that gives your brain the nutrients it needs to function at its best.
And sleep, of course.
Oh yeah, sleep is crucial. Gives your body and mind a chance to recharge, which directly affects your emotional well-being.
I think people often forget how much those basic things, what you eat, how much you sleep, how much that affects your mental state, it's all connected.
It really is. And then beyond those foundational things, the source also mentioned practices like mindfulness and prayer as ways to cope.
Hmm, that's interesting. How
Yeah.
do those fit in?
Well, things like meditation, prayer, gratitude journaling, they can help calm your mind, reduce stress, shift your focus to the more positive aspects of life. For a lot of people, it brings a sense of peace, a feeling of connection to something bigger than themselves.
Yeah, like finding a little bit of grounding and perspective amidst the chaos, right?
Exactly. But, as the source carefully points out, it's important to approach these practices with balance.
Right, right.
Faith and spirituality can be super comforting and supportive, but they shouldn't replace professional care, especially if you're dealing with more serious mental health challenges.
So it's not about choosing one or the other. It's about finding what works for you and having a well-rounded approach.
Exactly. And it's about respecting what each person needs. For some, faith is a central part of their healing. For others, it might not be as important. The key is creating a space where all approaches are valued and people feel empowered to seek out the support that resonates most with them.
I like that. We all have different paths to healing, right?
Absolutely.
Now, before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, there's one thing I keep coming back to: loneliness. If it's really playing such a big role in these widespread conditions, what can we do as individuals, as a society, to create more meaningful connections? Even in this tech-driven world we live in, that's a question I think we all need to wrestle with.
It's a big one, for sure. Yeah, it's a question that keeps popping up, and for good reason. I mean, it's kind of ironic, right? We've got all these ways to connect, but so many of us are feeling more and more lonely.
Yeah, it's like we're drowning in information, but starving for, I don't know, real connection, you know?
We're scrolling through social media, we're liking and commenting, but are we actually connecting? I think that's the heart of it, right? We might be interacting, but those interactions are often pretty surface level. You know what I mean? It's like we're getting a little taste of connection, but it's not the kind that really fills you up.
And we can't just tell people to go out and make friends, can we?
It's not
It's simple.
Definitely not. There are all these bigger societal factors at play. The way our society's set up, it often prioritizes like individual achievement and being busy over community and connection.
So where do we even start to, fix this? How do we go from a culture of isolation to a culture of connection?
Well, I think the first step is just awareness. Recognizing that loneliness is a real issue, not just a personal failing.
Yeah.
It's understanding that those feelings of isolation are often like symptoms of a bigger problem.
Right. So it's not about blaming individuals, but looking at the systems that are contributing to this, like epidemic of loneliness.
Exactly. Think about how our work culture often values individual achievement over collaboration and community, or how, like, urban design can sometimes create spaces that are more isolating than inviting.
So it's not just about individual effort, but also about creating environments that encourage connection.
Exactly. Imagine if we made it a priority to have more community spaces, public parks, affordable housing options that encourage interaction.
Hmm.
What if workplaces actively promoted teamwork and social events, or schools really focused on fostering a sense of belonging?
It's about shifting our values, right? Valuing connection as much as we value productivity or economic growth. But even while those bigger changes are happening, I think there are things we can do as individuals too. Like, how do we break out of this cycle of feeling lonely, even when we're surrounded by people both online and offline?
That's where mindfulness comes in, I think. It's about being present in our interactions,
Hmm.
putting down our phones, truly engaging with the people around us, really listening to what they have to say. It's about actively seeking out meaningful conversations and experiences.
So it's about being intentional with our social lives, choosing to invest in a few deep connections rather than spreading ourselves thin across a million superficial ones. Quality over quantity, as they say.
Exactly. It's about figuring out which relationships really nourish us and making those a priority.
And that goes for our online interactions too, right? Maybe it's time to take a look at our social media feeds, unfollow accounts that make us feel bad or envious, and instead seek out ones that inspire us or spark genuine connection.
Totally. We have way more control over our online environments than we realize. We can choose to engage with content that lifts us up, connects us to our passions, or introduces us to new perspectives.
And maybe instead of just liking or commenting on a post, we actually reach out to someone, start a real conversation, or even suggest meeting up in person. Take that online interaction and turn it into something more.
Yeah, it's about making an effort to turn those passive online interactions into something more authentic and engaging.
And I think part of building those connections is also about being vulnerable ourselves.
Yeah.
Being willing to share our own struggles, to let people see our real selves, even the messy parts.
Yeah, that vulnerability is what opens the door to real intimacy and connection. When we let ourselves be seen flaws and all we give other people permission to do the same, it creates a sense of shared humanity.
Like we're all in this together.
Right.
We're all human. We all have struggles. We all want to connect.
Exactly. So we've talked about addressing loneliness on a societal level and on an individual level, but what about people who are already dealing with anxiety and depression? How do we help them find connection and belonging?
That's such a good question. Because those conditions can make it even harder to reach out and to connect, right?
Absolutely. Well, I think the first thing is just validating their experience,
Yeah.
letting them know that their feelings are real and they're not alone in this. It's about listening without judgment, offering empathy instead of advice.
So instead of saying just snap out of it or you have so much to be grateful for, we offer a listening ear and a safe space for them to share their pain.
Exactly. Sometimes the best thing we can do is just be present with someone, to hold space for their suffering without trying to fix it.
And beyond just listening, are there any practical things we can do to support loved ones who are struggling?
We can encourage them to get professional help, offer to go with them to appointments, or just check in regularly to let them know we're thinking of them. Little things can go a long way in reminding someone that they're loved and supported.
Like bringing them a meal, maybe, or offering to help with errands,
Yeah.
or even just sending a text message to let them know they're not forgotten.
Exactly. Those acts of kindness, no matter how small, they can be so powerful in reminding someone that they're not alone.
And I think it's important to encourage those healthy coping mechanisms too, right? Like exercise, a balanced diet, getting enough sleep.
Absolutely. Those lifestyle factors can make a huge difference in managing symptoms and just feeling better overall. You could offer to join a yoga class together, cook a healthy meal, or just encourage them to get outside and get some fresh air and sunshine.
It's about being a supportive presence on their journey, not trying to force them into a specific box or timeline.
Exactly. Recovery's not a straight line. There will be ups and downs, setbacks, and breakthroughs. The important thing is to offer consistent support and remind them that they're not alone in this.
And, it's important to remember that sometimes people who are battling anxiety and depression might resist help or push people away.
That's true. These conditions can make it really hard to reach out or accept support. It's important to remember that it's not personal. It's often a symptom of the illness itself.
So how do we handle those situations when our loved ones are pushing us away?
I think patience and persistence are key.
Hmm.
We need to express our concern without judgment, offer support without conditions, and respect their boundaries while still letting them know that we're there for them when they're ready.
It's a tough balance, isn't it? Giving them space, but also letting them know they're not alone, even when they feel isolated.
It is. It's a delicate dance. But it's important to remember that even when it feels like our efforts aren't getting through, we're still planting seeds of hope that might grow later on.
And sometimes the best thing we can do is just point them towards professional resources, right?
Right.
Like therapy or support groups, where they can get help from people who are trained to deal with these things.
Exactly. We're not therapists, and we can't be expected to have all the answers. Sometimes the best way to support someone is to connect them with people who are equipped to help.
Okay, so we've covered a lot here, from the societal things that contribute to loneliness to the individual ways we can build connection and support people who are struggling. But before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to talk about something that comes up a lot when we talk about mental health: faith and spirituality. The source mentioned prayer as a source of comfort, but I think it's a topic that often gets, I don't know, oversimplified or just brushed aside.
Yeah, it's definitely a complex topic. And for a lot of people, it's a really personal part of healing. For some, faith and spirituality give them this deep sense of meaning, purpose, like a connection to something bigger than themselves.
Yeah, like an anchor in the storm, right? Something to hold on to when everything else feels chaotic.
And things like prayer, meditation, going to religious services, they can bring peace, a sense of community, support, which can be huge when you're dealing with anxiety and depression.
But like the source said, we got to be careful about balance here.
Right.
It's not about faith replacing professional care, especially when things are really serious.
Right. It's not either. It's more about bringing both together. Professional help gives you tools, strategies to deal with symptoms, and faith, spirituality that can give you hope, purpose, connection. It all kind of works together.
So it's about recognizing that both have their place and that healing can happen on all these different levels: physical, emotional, spiritual.
Exactly. And it's about respecting different choices. Some people, faith is central to how they heal. For others, it might not be as big a deal. The key is to create a space where every approach is okay, and people feel good about seeking out the support that works for them.
Love that. As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave folks with a few takeaways that really stuck with me. Anxiety and depression, they're medical conditions, not some personal flaw. There's no shame in getting help, and recovery is possible.
So important to remember that. And you're not alone in this. Millions of people deal with these things, and there's help out there. Don't be afraid to reach out to people you trust, mental health professionals, whatever feels right for you.
And don't wait. The sooner you address these things, the better. And while professional help is crucial, don't underestimate those lifestyle changes too. Exercise, diet, sleep, all that plays a big role in your overall well-being.
Yeah, and remember, healing's a journey, not a destination. There'll be ups and downs, setbacks, breakthroughs. Just be patient with yourself, celebrate your wins, and never give up hope.
I love that. It's not a straight line, right? So as we sign off here, I want to leave everyone with one final thought. We've talked a lot about how much loneliness plays a role in anxiety and depression. So I challenge you, listener, be that source of connection in your own life and in your community. Reach out to someone who might be struggling. Offer a listening ear, a kind word, a small gesture of support. You never know the impact you might have.
Even those little acts of kindness, they can ripple out and create a more compassionate, more connected world.
What a beautiful thought. That's a great place to leave it. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into anxiety and depression. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other.
Before we go further, just want to pause to give special thanks to our sponsors, Palak Shah from RDSP Investments. Thank you for your generous support in making this podcast possible. Soundamax.com, official podcast microphone sponsor. We're grateful to Soundamax.com for the premium Leviter microphones, seamlessly connecting to Android and iPhone, requiring no extra apps, and delivering crystal clear audio up to 65 feet. Studio quality sound under $80. Use coupon code PODCAST for an exclusive discount. FireXBlanket.com, co-sponsor. Control small home fires quickly with the Fire Blanket, reusable solution under $30. Visit their website and use coupon code PODCAST for a special discount. Thank you to all our sponsors for your incredible support.